What if Spider-Man was presented with a different option? An option to just change villains' personalities so they weren't evil. This is the Comicstorian channel where I take some of your favorite trade paperbacks and single issues and I break them down into digestible bites to help you understand. And then I read them dramatically back to you. Today we're going to be covering one of the larger storylines that Nick Spencer has written, individual story arcs. It's called The Sin Eater. And I believe I titled the video something different, but this is the Sin Eater storyline, which ends all the way up to Amazing Spider-Man issue 50. If you enjoy this storyline, please consider going to check out our sponsor, G Fuel. Use the code COMICS at checkout when getting your order of G Fuel. And you can also check out the Patreon, where you can help support us and help make videos like this possible. Patreon.com/Comicstorian. All right, let's get into this monstrous Spider-Man storyline. As Spider-Man sleeps, he hears something. A voice pulling at the back of his mind, telling him that there's so much to show him, so much to talk about. Soon they will meet face to face, but for now, they should just enjoy this. Spider-Man blinks and he finds himself in the backseat of a car as Overdrive races through the city. He asks Spider-Man what kind of music he likes. Since his powers are supercharging cars, he doesn't really fix the radios. So how about they do it the old-fashioned way and pass time with stories? It all started when he was hired by the inner demons to get them across the border after a heist. Issue was the demons killed a dozen cops on their way out. While trying to figure out what to do next, the lights suddenly went out. A man came, the Sin Eater. He wanted to cleanse them. Except that there was more to it. The demons turned into real demons, or maybe the Sin Eater did. Either way, he had to get out of there. He would have rather dealt with the Punisher than the Sin Eater. He escaped, but no matter how fast he went, he'd look back and he'd see him there, getting closer and closer each time. It's been 3 days and 3 nights, never stopping, never resting. He didn't want anyone to get hurt. Maybe letting him catch up wasn't such a bad thing. Perhaps it was even good. Suddenly, the Sin Eater appeared in front of the car and it crashed. And all Spider-Man could see is the Sin Eater pointing his gun. It's at that point that Spider-Man woke up in his bed, confused as to what just happened. He reached for his phone to call MJ, but he only gets her voicemail. He tells her that he knows that she's going to be away for a while and that she was okay. But really, he isn't okay. He hasn't been sleeping well, and even when he's awake, things just feel wrong. The other day, he did a podcast with Jonah. Jonah was talking about how Spider-Man keeps people at a distance, how he pretends that he doesn't want anyone to get hurt. But the truth is more complicated than that. You see, there was a night that Spider-Man came home from patrol. He passed out after crawling through the window. The next morning, he was running late like usual, except when he was outside, he still had the mask on. The line is starting to blur. People are counting on him, and that's always going to be more important. But he needs there to be something. He needs there to be a reason. He needs something out there to have him take off that mask. Why doesn't he take off the mask? There was something he wanted to ask her before she left, but it was not important. They could talk about it when she gets back. Before Spider-Man could finish, he feels something crawling inside, and then all of these bugs and these creatures burst out of his stomach. He's dying, and no matter how hard he fights it, he feels like he's sinking, that there's someone pushing his head below. Kindred holds Spider-Man's head under the sand, stating that they wonder who he really is, but the real question is, what does he want? But then again, it's all just a dream, just preparing him for something truly sinister. And if that isn't enough, that this just wasn't his dream, that there were others who saw the same thing. As Spider-Man feels the slithering, crashing, and sinking feelings, getting out to watch a play does help. The only problem is he wasn't supposed to go out alone. There was a plan. MJ was supposed to be back in town and they were going to go to the best restaurant in town, catch Shakespeare in the park. It was a great plan. However, it was just him eating, and it was just him at the play. Something came up that caused MJ to have to cancel, and really, it's kind of refreshing to experience the other side of things. But still, it doesn't make it sting any less. However, before Spider-Man could wallow in self-pity, his spider sense goes off and he instinctively pushes a man out of the street before getting hit by Overdrive? This isn't Overdrive's style. Overdrive sticks to small crimes, in it for the money, but this was in that dream. Spider-Man quickly changes his costume in the alleyway and he swings over to the speeding car, knocking out its window. Overdrive rolls down the window shouting, "Oh, thank God, it's you!" And Spider-Man says that is not the usual response he gets, but he'll take it. He says that Overdrive should probably pull over and return whatever it was that he stole, but Overdrive yells, "I didn't steal anything! Whatever I did, it doesn't matter! He won't stop chasing me!" Spider-Man tells him it'll all be okay, they just need to slow down. He is right behind us, isn't he? Spider-Man looks over his shoulder to see the ghostly outline of Sin Eater telling him, "No, please, not him." Overdrive yells again, "He's right in front of us!" And Sin Eater appears right in front of the car, pulling the trigger. The supercharged car explodes into a fiery ball of metal and debris, and it begins to shower down on the streets. Spider-Man quickly grabs two kids that are in the way, tossing them to safety. Not his best work, but they'll be okay. As the car lands, Spider-Man quickly rushes over to try and save Overdrive, who keeps telling him, "I deserve this. It's my fault." Spider-Man tries to use his web shooters, but they got jammed in the collision. Gotta get clear. Gotta get away from all of these people before anyone gets hurt. Also, probably shouldn't be heading into a dark, abandoned construction site while there's a serial murderer coming for me. As the two get inside, Spider-Man sets Overdrive down, and then a voice calls out that they should just hand him over. Spider-Man looks back, telling him, "I don't want to believe that it's you. Of all the bad guys to have gone through the revolving door that is death, I was really hoping that this one would stick. This is the man that killed Jean DeWolf and two other innocent people and nearly killed Betty Brant. He used to be Stan Carter, a police detective that fooled everyone, that sent even Spidey into a fire of rage, almost crossing the line, had it not been for Daredevil stomping him." Spider-Man lunges for the gun, but Sin Eater cracks him in the head with the stock, and the two begin to struggle over possession of the gun. It takes everything inside of Spider-Man to not just give in and end it, but then Sin Eater stomps it. He tells him, "I didn't mean to hurt anyone." This was a part of Sin Eater's story. You see, after killing all of those individuals, after driving Spider-Man into that rage, Sin Eater was institutionalized. Stan was treated and released. The doctor said that he was no longer a threat to anyone, but Spider-Man wouldn't accept that, so he confronted him, and it didn't end well. Not long after that, Stan baited the police into shooting him, but the truth is Spider-Man always felt like he was partly responsible for that. All of those emotions are slowing him down. Sin Eater headbutts Spider-Man, telling him, "I should be thanking you. This world would have me believe that I was delusional, insane, but it was only through the fires of hell that my true purpose was revealed. Don't you see? I really am the Sin Eater. I was sent to rescue the lost souls, the ones who could not be saved, and I am here to cleanse them." Spider-Man throws himself back into the fight for the gun, wrestling to try and take it from Sin Eater. Seeing his chance, Overdrive gets up, running towards one of the nearby cars, but Sin Eater quickly focuses his aim. He pulls the trigger and Spider-Man jumps in front of it, but the slug just passes through him. Before Overdrive could reach the car, he is shot through the chest. Spider-Man runs over to help, but Overdrive says, "You believe me, right?" Spider-Man tells him, "Yeah, I believe you. Just try and relax, Overdrive." Overdrive tells him it doesn't matter anymore. He isn't scared. It feels good to stop running. Sin Eater walks up, asking, "Don't you see? I freed him from his cowardice. I did him a kindness, Spider-Man. He was freed of his sins. I have taken them on as my own." Spider-Man gets up, clenching his fist, telling him, "Are you about to do me a kindness too?" Sin Eater tells him, "No, you have your sins, but not with me. The one who called me, the one who, well, he has a plan for you. I'll see you soon, Spider-Man. The work is not yet done." As Sin Eater fades into a ghostly mist, Spider-Man is left wondering what just happened. The words that Sin Eater spoke, "His work is not yet done," it crawled around his Spider-Man's head. He doesn't know what to do next, but it's only going to get worse. And then there was a feeling that there's something else lurking behind all of this. Later at the morgue, Carly Cooper gets ready to examine Overdrive's cause of death when she notices one small issue. Overdrive died from a gunshot wound to the chest, but now Overdrive doesn't have one. And as she takes a closer look, Overdrive opens his eyes and he gets up asking, What happened to me?" The next day at the Empire State University, Project Pegasus was showcasing their latest project known as the Catalyst. It was developed to be a more promising thing in renewable energy since nuclear. While the hall was filled with observers, it was also visited by Count Nefaria and his lethal legion who wanted the machine for themselves. It didn't take long for Spider-Man to get there and assist, but during the fight there was a gunshot. Spider-Man looks up, just simply saying, "Not now." But he already knew that this wasn't going to happen. Sin Eater was always going to be lurking around the corner. But there was something different this time. Sin Eater froze him in place, made him watch as he butchered the Legion. One by one, the lethal Legion was gunned down, and as everyone in the crowd watched, they began to clap. Sin Eater looks at Spider-Man asking, "Don't you see it now? Your way of handling the problems that you face are over. People want something better. The people want something pure. And soon they'll receive my gift." Afterwards, everyone interviewed was talking about how amazing and awesome the Sin Eater was. He was like the Punisher, but better. However, when the EMTs were interviewed, he told a totally different story. Once everything was cleared, they were allowed to go in and remove the bodies, but the bodies got up. Now, it's not uncommon for this kind of a thing to happen in the world of Marvel. People die, they get revived, they die again. But what made this one different was that Nefaria got up asking if everyone was all right. An hour before, the guy was a stone-cold killer, but the second he comes back, he's a harmless puppy. Ever hear anything like that? Nora Winters turns off her camera, telling him, no, she hasn't. Later at the Ravencroft prison, the doctor explains that the individuals that the Sin Eater has shot has come back to life, and since then, they've become model patients. They spend most of their time quiet, huddled alone together. But when they take a break from that, it's to perform random acts of kindness for the other inmates. They haven't raised their voices, let alone their fists, in anger since they got here. Hell, Whirlwind ended up in the infirmary after some old associates paid him a visit, and he didn't even try to defend himself. Nora says that she needs to talk to them, and the doctor tells her that there's no chance of that. They have protocols, and at that moment a voice says, "Nonsense. We both know how often the rules are broken around here." Norman Osborn walks up, and Nora says that she can't believe it. Just a week ago, he was locked up in a padded cell just down the hall. And now they're letting actual inmates run the place? Norman tells him that she is not the first to make that joke. Mayor Fisk decided that his intimate knowledge of this place made him the perfect man to change the culture of chaos and incompetence that has permeated from it. As for her request, consider it granted, but a word of caution. She may be tempted to write about this Sin Eater's otherworldly influence and effect that it's had on the ethereal souls of these criminals. But this is a place of medicine, and he, for one, has no time for superstition. As far as he is concerned, their successful rehabilitation is due to the excellent staff and leadership of Ravencroft, a viewpoint that he would like to see fairly reflected in her article. However, she may consider the resources of this institution at her disposal, including these fine security officers who will accompany her at all times. As the two men guide Nora away, the doctor asks if that was really such a good idea. A reporter on the grounds feels like a bit of a risk. Nora tells him not to worry, given their recent arrival. Meanwhile, over at the McCarthy Medical Center, Spider-Man punches the wall in anger that there is something about them, and it's the same as Stan, down to the stuttering before this is a trap. The Sin Eater is toying with them, but why? Sin Eater wasn't cured, but everyone else seems to think so. He's cleansing the supervillains. We could have a problem with that, all except for Overdrive. It doesn't make sense. Why would Overdrive be the only one not under the effects like the others? Something's off. Spider-Man looks at Carly, stating that if there's anything she'd like to share, now is the time. But later, Nora finishes her interviews at Ravencroft and gets ready to head home. She calls up Jonah, telling him that she won't believe what she got and she'll be back at the office soon. But as she turns the car on, Sin Eater leans up from the back seat. Ah, Nora Winters! And then there's a gunshot. A short while later, video footage is played of Sin Eater. He explains that he used to be afraid like many of them. Afraid of everything around him, but even more than that, afraid of what was inside of him. He was taught to fear everything. Because of that, they were able to control him. He didn't just obey their laws, he exalted them. He found salvation in fire, but one greater than he could ever be gave him a calling, a mission to cleanse the world of sin. So here he is, risen, ready to do his work. The world around him is worse than ever. It has been corrupted beyond all recognition, and some would say that it's not even worth saving. To do what must be done, he needs help. Their help. In return, he'll give them one thing that they'll need. Power. Jonah steps back from the computer monitor, stating that he isn't so sure about this, Nora. He was around the first time that the Sin Eater came. He's dangerous. How did she even get this? Nora smiles, telling him that it was easy. She shot him. He magically pulled the bullet from his chest and said that he wanted to speak to the people. In an interview to spread his message, how could she say no? Jonah says that his message is one that incites violence. They can't give him a platform to spew this garbage. Jonah sighs, telling her that this is why people don't trust the media anymore, self-appointed gatekeepers deciding who or who cannot be heard. It is time that to let the public decide. Sites like theirs are the new town square. And so, Sin Eater's message goes out to the world on J. Jonah Jameson's platform. Every cell phone, computer, and TV can be heard playing his message, his call to arms that together they can let loose their righteous anger and burn those in their way with purifying fire. That from the ashes of it all, they can build something better. It won't be easy. To put on the mask of the Sin Eaters is to carry the sins of the world. But they will not shoulder the burden alone. He will be there every step of the way. If they ever felt alone, isolated, forgotten, this is their moment. Together, they will be made real. Together, they will build a world without sin. And back at McCarthy Medical Center, Spider-Man says that Sin Eater is offering them power, and the people are, well, some people at least are listening. But if they can share what happened to Overdrive, maybe they can change their minds. Overdrive was cleansed like the others, but he isn't moving around like the others. Carly Sai stating that she can tell him what happened, but he isn't going to like it. When she was examining Overdrive, he did wake up like the others. He wanted to confess his crimes. Being a detective, she took his statement and waited for her superiors. But for what it's worth, the guy genuinely seemed remorseful. But the officers showed up and they didn't arrest him. When she realized what was going on, she rushed in to help. If she had come in a minute later, Overdrive would have died again. She tried to report it, but they're saying that they're not even going to file charges against the officers. Something about Overdrive having already been declared dead. Overdrive not up and walking like the others isn't because of Sin Eater, it's because he was beaten half to death afterwards. So later, in Union Square, Sin Eater's call to arms begins to have many of those who believed his words gather. His followers begin their preparations on their attack, all devoted to his cause. Spider-Man quietly watches from inside the building as Sin Eater tells them that he promised them strength and that now, they will have it. It won't be coming from him, but from one other. They've been given a job to do. What is it that they're after? The green masked crowd shouts, "A world without sin!" And the Sin Eater tells them, that's right. The more that we cleanse, the stronger that we become. And when we have... At that moment, a man pushes through the crowd asking if it's him. If it's really him. Please, he has to reach him. Sin Eater motions to allow the troubled man through, and the man falls to his knees asking if it's true. Can he really be cleansed? He's hurt so many, killed so many. Please cleanse him, Sin Eater. Sin Eater turns to everyone, asking if they see it. Their message is working. The sick and infested with sin beg them to be saved. And today, he will give them a mercy. As Sin Eater points his gun, Spider-Man jumps out of the shadows, yelling, "No!" And he kicks with both of his feet, knocking the Sin Eater down. He then gets back up, telling everyone to listen to him. This is Sin Eater you're listening to. He's a monster, and whatever he is offering you, it'll only end in tears. Sin Eater gets back up, stating that these people are done listening to Spider-Man's promises. That's why they're here, to join me, to receive my power. Spider-Man swings, but Sin Eater converts his body into air to avoid the attack. Normally, Spider-Man could take Sin Eater down in a one-on-one fight, but now, after he's cleansed the Lethal Legion and taken their powers, it's a whole different ballgame. The followers cheer as Sin Eater begins to beat Spider-Man down, and Spider-Man realizes that at this point, he's outclassed. He can't fight back no matter how hard he tries. With one final knockdown, Sin Eater walks up asking if he knows what his problem is. He thinks that he's superior, above all of this, above them. The one who called him back as a plan for Spider-Man. He is just the vessel, and the next person that must be cleansed is Norman Osborn. The followers begin to take to the streets, inciting the will of Sin Eater's will upon those who disagree. Most of the sins that these people have committed are simply because they didn't go along with them. And that is why Spider-Man called on Miles Morales to help take back the streets of New York. Even though the two managed to take down several groups of thugs, it doesn't stop the overwhelming numbers that have already made it to Ravencroft's gates. Once the two of them have a moment to breathe, Miles asks if they're really going after Norman. Maybe they should let him, Peter. Spider-Man says that he knows that that can't happen, and Miles asks, why not? Sin Eater isn't killing them. If Sin Eater can turn the Nefaria dude from an international terrorist to a guy who knits a lot, maybe some good can come out of this. Sin Eater is a bad guy, we all get that, but maybe we let him do his thing with Norman, and then we stop him. Spider-Man puts on his mask, stating that he knows that there will be someone to replace Norman once he's gone. And he swings away, thinking back to his encounters with Norman, thinking to himself that Miles has a point. Whether it's Green Goblin or Norman Osborn, it's not hard to see how this story will eventually end. Every time Norman fights back, he keeps finding ways to become more deadly, more dangerous. Luckily, he has managed to best Norman, but how long before the luck runs out? How long before Norman's luck runs out? Back at the gates of Ravencroft, Sin Eater calls out to Norman, stating that he knows that he can hear him, that they can see him. Before they begin, he promised to empower them, so lay your hands upon me. All of you, receive this gift. Accept your calling as I accepted mine. The Sin Eater supercharges all of his followers, and they turn back to Ravencroft, and Sin Eater yells, "Go forward in my name and cleanse." Meanwhile, back at the subway, Spider-Man fights through another gathering, thinking about what Miles said. Norman is a bad guy. Norman has killed so many that he's cared for. Friends, allies, even Gwen Stacy? But before he could finish his thought, Gwen Stacy from another universe swings in assisting, telling Spider-Man that he's looking pretty awful. Insert line about seeing a ghost here. Sure, this isn't his Gwen Stacy. She comes from a very different world. She's Spider-Gwen, the ghost spider, Gwenum. But it still feels kind of weird. As the two web up to take out the remaining followers, she reminds him that he's the one who texted her. Gwen says that Miles is making a big mistake. But then again, the whole thing sounds like a deal with the devil. Spider-Man says that he never loved anyone before his Gwen, and the day that she was taken away, he swore that he wouldn't do something and didn't. He tried, but sometimes he keeps himself up at night wondering if she's waiting for him to do what he said. Gwen tells him that she may not be his Gwen. However, it isn't her that decides what happens. He has a tough choice to make, but it's his choice, no one else's. Spider-Man hurries over to Ravencroft, but before going in, a voice tells him that some people may call this destiny. As Spider-Man looks back to see Julia Carper, Madame Web, stepping out of the shadows. She says that she is here because the Web tells her that this is a very important moment in his life, and the outcome of it all remains frustratingly unclear. He is paralyzed by a mix of doubt, guilt, and responsibility. She's also going to get that inner narration is pretty overwhelming. Spider-Man says that he isn't sure what to do. Julia tells him that they'll talk it through. He's already considered how dangerous Norman is, how every time that they've met, it's like playing with death. He shrugs it off, not worried about himself, but it's the memory of all of the innocent people that have died at Norman's hands, the ones that he loved especially. He feels that hurt every day. This isn't about revenge, it can't be, so he finds himself at the last question of it all, the one that he can't get past. It would all have been so much easier if the Sin Eater wanted to kill him, but the Sin Eater wants to cure Norman, make him into a good individual. It's a trap, obviously. There's something sinister and immoral about what he's doing. But even still, Norman Osborn harmless? How many lives would that save? She doesn't need powers to tell him that so long as Norman and the Green Goblin walk this earth, he will kill again. As Julia leaves, Spider-Man thinks to himself that she's right. The only question is, when will he kill again? When does the monster come back out? When does he come for someone that Spider-Man loves? Someone... And a second later, Spider-Man crashes through the windows, fighting through the mob that is grabbing Norman, getting ahead of everyone. Norman pushes himself off, asking, "What the hell do you all think you're doing?" As Spider-Man punches him down, telling him that he's rescuing him. But back outside, Gwen swings in, stating that he actually went for it, though she can't say that she's surprised. Miles follows behind, stating that he thought he'd have gotten through to him. And Silk says that if the ghosts of Christmas past, future, and present didn't get through, nothing will. Spider-Woman says maybe there are other ways that we could have done this. And Julia tells her no. He made his choice, and now they will make theirs. It's pretty clear what they need to do, and those that are a part of the Order of Web must stop Spider-Man. Before heading back down into the fight, Norman says that they both know what needs to be done here, and it isn't even a choice. To save the city, to save everyone, and everything that he loves, he'll need help. They were destined for this. Together, they will fulfill their destiny. Spider-Man and the Green Goblin fighting side by side. Norman begins to fight as the Green Goblin. Spider-Man knows that this is wrong. He did this to stop a monster, not resurrect another. The Goblin has taken everything from him more than once, and it's only a matter of time before he does it again. Norman grabs one of the followers, getting ready to stab him, but Spider-Man jumps in, stating that if they're going to work together, then it's by my rules, Goblin. No one dies. Not now, not ever. Norman smiles as he tosses a pumpkin bomb into the crowd, blowing them apart. And as the Sin Eater looks back, his missing arm begins to grow back. Norman jumps onto his glider, rushing in, asking, "You were saying?" As the two fight, those touched by the Web of Life watch, and Silk says that this is getting a little creepy, getting real Beetlejuice vibe here. Julia says that there's a moment of great conscience about to take place. Anya says that that's the part that she doesn't understand. Why aren't they helping? And Spider-Woman says that it isn't time yet. Julia says that this is correct. This is not the fight that they need to be concerned with. They all saw the visions. If they don't stop him, the Green Goblin is going to kill Spider-Man. But there is something else standing in the way of that. The Sin Eater. Only after he cleanses Norman can they step in. Miles watches, stating that that's the problem with that. Spider-Man and Norman are pals right now. It kills me to say this, but the guy's not thinking clearly right now. We have to stop him. Gwen then says they have a second option. Don't. Back inside, Spider-Man and Norman begin to get overrun by the followers, and in the distance they hear ka-thoom, ka-thoom, ka-thoom. Suddenly the followers stop attacking and they begin to kneel. Norman smiles, stating, "There he is. It looks like they have found the new arrival that was hidden below." Sin Eater steps out of the shadows, infused with Juggernaut's power, his skin stretched out as though it was the Juggernaut's armor, telling Norman that his sins are many. They consumed you in the end. And Spider-Man, so much hatred, such a tortured history, can barely tell you two apart. Spider-Man says that he can't let this happen, and the Sin Eater says, "Look at where your guilt has brought you. I offer salvation from this monster, and it said you stand in my way. Wish to say that I'd be surprised." Norman laughs. "Haha, I agree. Spider-Man is so predictable, isn't he? Such a bleeding heart. He is, what's the word? Soft." Norman jumps on his glider and he begins to hurl pumpkin bombs, but Sin Eater reaches out, grabbing him by the neck. Spider-Man jumps back and swinging, but it's the same as fighting the Juggernaut himself, just with a lot more power. Nothing's gonna stop Sin Eater Juggernaut. As the two are punches away, Spider-Man says that attacking from the front is probably a bad idea. Isn't there a hidden layer or something here, Norman? There has to be a way out of this place. Norman sighs, stating that there is a sub-basement level, and inside there's a dock station with a small vessel that can get them out onto the river. Spider-Man asks, "Why would you need that?" And Norman smiles. "Now is not the time to discuss it. We have other things to be concerned about, like the rampaging Sin Eater Juggernaut." Just then, missile turrets spring out of the walls and ceiling, and they begin to fire at the oncoming Sin Eater. As Norman flies off, Spider-Man says, "You know that's not going to stop him, right?" Sin Eater gets up out of the debris and begins to make his way through Ravencroft's defenses. Try as they might, he effectively takes down both Spider-Man and Norman. Sin Eater holds his gun to Norman's head, but during that, Spider-Man gets to work webbing up key points in the room. Spider-Man then calls out to the Sin Eater, telling him, "Sorry, but it looks like we all got off on the wrong floor. Going down?" He pulls on all of the tethers, bringing the entire floor down on top of the Sin Eater, trapping him in the rubble, but also trapping himself. Moments go by and Spider-Man hears a voice asking if he remembers the first time that they met, as in truly met, face to face. He bared his soul to him. He confessed his darkest secrets. And what was he given in return? Rejection. He's always hated him for that. Spider-Man weakly tells him, "I was a kid. I was scared of you, Norman." And Norman shouts, "So was I! I may have come off a bit aggressive, but that was the nature of my illness. It broke me, and after being spurned, after being bested in battle, as the lab burned around us, you saved me. Do you know how angry that made me, that after everything I owed you? Well, as of today, consider our debt paid." Norman grunts as he lifts the giant slab, pinning Spider-Man down, allowing him a chance to pull himself free. Norman reaches down to tell him to get up, that the plan worked, at least for the moment. The little stunt put them right at the doorstep of the sub-basement. As Norman opens up the locked door, Spider-Man looks at the large opening inside, asking, "What is this place? And is that some kind of electromagnetic pulse? It's the biggest one that I've ever seen, and it could black out half of the eastern seaboard." Just then there's a rumble from above, and the Sin Eater bursts through, telling him, "No more running!" Spider-Man hates to admit it, but the Sin Eater is right, and Norman groans, telling him, "So, to the bitter end?" Spider-Man follows his lead, to the bitter end. Spider-Man jumps onto the glider with Norman asking if he's ready, and Spider-Man tells him to serve it up. Norman throws several pumpkin bombs, and Spider-Man webs them together, slamming them into the Sin Eater's chest, sending him into the ground. Sin Eater gets back up, punching into the ground, sending a shockwave that knocks the two of them off balance. And then Norman asks, how did he defeat the Juggernaut before? Spider-Man tells him that it wasn't easy. It took a lot of concrete and... Wait, that's it! The EMP's compression generator! If we direct the vibrations into the ground, it'll create a tremor. With any real tremor, there's a liquefaction. Norman says that that would take some very precise calculations in a very narrow window of time. And Spider-Man asks, "Can you do it?" Norman laughs. "I built the damn thing." As Norman runs to the terminal, Spider-Man gets up telling the Sin Eater that it doesn't have to be this way. When the whole thing started, he let him down. He knows that. He was just so angry because he was afraid. He was always afraid of what he might lose. He is responsible for what happened. The death of Stan is on his hands. So if there's anyone who needs their sins cleansed, it's him. The Sin Eater stares for a moment and then knocks Spider-Man away, telling him, "It is not your will, but Norman's be done." Spider-Man yells ahead, and as Norman activates the EMP, the computer says, "System powering on." A few seconds later, there's a shockwave that rattles everything. The Sin Eater steadies his aim as the next tremors come out, but Spider-Man jumps up, pushing Sin Eater's arm away. Sin Eater then pushes down to get his shot, and as Spider-Man tries to hold him back, the force is unstoppable. He can't, but he has to try. He has to fight. Even as his bones snap, he has to try. And at that moment, Spider-Man begins to feel something. The ground beneath his feet. The EMP is working. The two fall into a liquefied ground, and as the Sin Eater sinks, he shouts, asking, "What have you done? You'd give your life for him?" As Spider-Man sinks down, he thinks, no, not for Osborn, but for everyone else. For what's supposed to be right. Yeah, I can live with that. Then again, how about I just survive instead? He fires a web shot, pulling himself out, but as the line is suddenly cut, Norman is hovering over, watching. Spider-Man calls out to give him a hand. But then he sees Norman's smile, and he knows that's not going to happen. Spider-Man yells that they had a deal, and Norman asks, "Did we? The debt has been paid. Please understand that this is not how I wanted it to be for either of us, but this is what you deserve. A true hero's death, Spider-Man." Norman leans down to push Spider-Man's head below the concrete, but suddenly, he lets go. Spider-Man watches as Gwen swings through, pulling Norman back, and Miles follows behind, grabbing him, pulling him out. Spider-Man lands, looking around at everyone, asking, "Is this like a surprise party or something? If so, you guys have like fantastic timing." Julia says that they would have been here sooner, but there was some controversy along the way. They knew he was in grave danger. It was just a question of when and how to intervene. Spider-Man says that he doesn't get it. Were they supposed to save him from Sin Eater, or Miles tells him, the other guy? The debate was whether or not to throw him to Sin Eater first, and they almost did it. Norman says, "See? Just like I said, everything would work out as long as we stick together." Everyone piles onto Norman's escape vessel, and as he leans close to Gwen, he says that he is familiar with this person. "Did they just call you Gwen? I heard a rumor, of course. But even still, to actually see you, to be near you, well, forgive me, it's just a bit intoxicating. Are you a clone, one of Jackal's, someone from another dimension?" Gwen turns back, telling him that she is his nothing. And Norman laughs, telling her, "Give it some time. Your original and I had quite a history." Spider-Man turns back, grabbing Norman, slamming him back, telling him, "You do not talk to her! You do not even look at her!" Norman says, "In the end, I'll be sure to make it quick and painless as I can stand. She deserves that. All of them do." Images begin to flash through Spider-Man's mind. The beginning of Norman, then now. It's his choice. It's always been his choice. They all know what happens next. Someone will die at his hands. Someone always dies. So Spider-Man punches the wall next to Norman's head, and Norman tells him, "We wouldn't want you to snap. Now would we?" Spider-Man pulls his fist back, but this time he slams it into the hatch release, throwing Norman out. And as the hatch closes, Anya asks, what did he just do? Spider-Man says that he made a different choice, and Julia tells him no, he didn't, but it's too late now. Trap laid for Sin Eater served its purpose in allowing the others to escape, but they knew it would only hold him for so long. However, Kindred laughed, telling Spider-Man not to beat himself up. One wrong to do so much right, to save so many lives. It's a lesson that you've got to learn, one way or another. This is how it always is without sins. No matter how deep you lay in the ground, you never stay buried. And there you have it, the conclusion to a massive Spider-Man story written by Nick Spencer, known as The Sin Eater. I enjoyed it for what it is. I thought it was a little bit longer than it really needed to be, but I mean, I'm not the guy that wrote that storyline. Norman Osborn and Spider-Man finally having to team up only for Spider-Man to realize that this is just going to end the same way that it always does is a great storyline. I think a villain known as the Sin Eater, who can kind of clear people's minds of what they're really doing and what actually happens to them, also a great concept. What if Spider-Man is presented with the idea of just changing people's personalities? I do believe we did a similar concept recently over in Teen Titans, where they were wiping the memories of the villains. But I liked how they handled it better over here because it was directly related to what Spider-Man was doing. I thought it hit a lot harder this way. What did you guys think of the storyline overall? I know this is one of our longer videos for an individual Spider-Man storyline, and I feel real bad for our editor, Kevin, so if you guys want to thank Kevin in the comments down below, I'm sure he'd appreciate that. But what did you guys think of the storyline overall? Don't forget to go check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Comicstorian, where things like this are able to happen. It's long videos like this that are capable because of that Patreon. So thank you guys so much. That's really it. If you stuck around to the ending, I hope you enjoyed it.